MRIs reveal smartphone addiction physically changes brains, cries a headline from Cult of Mac, who picked up the story from the Daily Mail. Everything changes your brain. Like, seriously, everything changes your brain. You watching this video right now is changing your brain physically. If your brain isn't constantly changing physically, I've got some bad news for you. You're dead. Amazingly, the Daily Mail headline is actually slightly better. How smartphone addiction changes your brain. Scans reveal how gray matter of tech addicts physically changes shape and size in a similar way to drug users. Okay, so it changes shape and size in a similar way to drug users. Now at least we have something to work with. Let's look at the study. 22 people with smartphone addiction were shoved into an MRI. Compared to people who did not have smartphone addiction, the addicts showed, according to researchers, lower gray matter volume in insula and temporal cortex and reduced resting state activity of the anterior cingulate cortex. To start off, let me just say I don't hate this study. It is what it is, but this fMRI data pops up several times a year in the mainstream press, and it's pretty much always reported like this. Video game addicts have brains like drug addicts. Cheese triggers the same part of your brain as drugs. Porn addiction is just like drug abuse. I'm a chocoholic, but for alcohol, and also chocolate. One of the main reasons this comparison happens so often, as Dean Burnett pointed out in The Guardian several years back, is that all of these things are pleasurable. Drugs are fun. Video games, fun. Porn, super fun. Cheese, the funnest. Pleasurable things all light up the same bits of our brains, the same reward pathways. That doesn't necessarily make them bad or damaging just because we think of drugs as being bad or damaging. So you should always be skeptical when you see anything in a headline that compares an object to drugs and how it affects the brain. Does that mean it's wrong? No. Not even drugs are necessarily wrong. It just means it's a fairly useless comparison for the most part. With that out of the way, the articles are framing this as actual damage, not just lighting up reward pathways like a drug, but decreasing brain activity and shrinking gray matter. So let's talk about that specifically. For a start, no one really knows how much brain activity in any particular area is normal. You may notice that all of these fMRI studies have a very small sample size. That's because they're fucking expensive and annoying. We can't just throw thousands of people into fMRIs to see what their brain is doing all the time, whenever they're on their phone or watching porn or just thinking about cheese and how delicious it is. So while you can say this small group of smartphone addicts shows some reduced activity compared to this small control group, you can't say that that means smartphone addiction reduces activity. Because for a start, you don't know if that applies to the population at large. You can just make an assumption. Second, you don't know if that's a bad thing. Third, you don't know if it's reversible, if it's temporary. And finally, you don't know if these people already had lower activity in that part of their brain, which then led them to develop an addiction to their smartphones, as opposed to the assumption that the smartphone reduced the activity. The other issue this study found was shrinkage of gray matter. Again, you don't really know if that's a very bad thing. You don't know if it's applicable to the population at large. You don't know if it's reversible. You don't know if it comes with an increase in other areas. That's what happened in at least one study on video games. As Neuroskeptic wrote on Discovery, action gaming led to a reduction in gray matter in the right hippocampus, but only in people with a response learning style. In those with a spatial learning style, action games increase gray matter in the left hippocampus. Again, none of this makes this particular study a bad study. I'll leave that type of designation to actual neurologists who can dig into the details a bit more. In general, I believe more data is pretty much always a good thing. But giving fodder to the Daily Mail to fearmonger over cell phones is most definitely not a good thing.